On October 20, 2016, a couple of women disappeared in the town of Durango, Colorado, 32-year-old Megan Blake and 28-year-old Sarah Lopez. They had traveled to the San Juan Mountains for the weekend, but never returned home. Their car was found abandoned near an old forest road, and there was no sign of the women. 7 years later, during repair work in an abandoned mine nearby, they came across a camouflaged underground bunker. Inside was a deteriorated metal safe, and inside it was an artifact that reopened the case. Durango, a small town in Colorado, was a quiet place in the fall of 2016 where everyone knew each other. Here, in a house on the outskirts of Enemas Road, lived Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez. To their neighbors, they were simply the girls from the house with the blue porch, a couple who always came to the Saturday market together and helped organize the town's festivals. Megan, a 32-year-old nurse at a local clinic, worked mostly night shifts. Her co-workers described her as calm, attentive, and always willing to stay longer to care for a patient. Sarah, 4 years younger, was an art teacher at Escalante Middle School. She had a passion for photography and often took her students on short hikes in the mountains to show them how light changes the landscape. Their relationship began in 2012. They did not hide the fact that they were living together, and the town had long been used to seeing them as a couple. Friends said that Megan and Sarah had opposite personalities, one practical, the other dreamy, but that was what created the balance. They dreamed of a long trip to the San Juan National Park, but always put it off. Work, money, or circumstances. In October of 2016, they finally decided to implement the plan. On October 20th, Thursday, Megan took 2 days off, and Sarah finished her last class at 2 in the afternoon. According to her colleagues, she went home after class carrying a box with printed photos of the students' work. At 5 o'clock in the evening, they were seen at the local city market supermarket. Cameras recorded them buying fuel, groceries, and gas cylinders for the campsite. Megan paid with a bank card at the checkout at 5 o'clock 22 minutes. They planned to leave the next morning. The Subaru Forester was prepared in advance: a spare tire, a first aid kit, a camping tent, and 2 sleeping bags. On the evening of October 20th, the neighbor on the left, Joanne Mitchell, saw Sarah carrying a large black backpack out of the house and joking, "We're going to come back tanned, like we came from vacation." On October 21st, a Friday, at 7 o'clock 40 minutes in the morning, cameras on the Durango exit captured a Subaru with a distinctive sticker on the trunk, a white sun in a circle. This was the last reliable visual fixation of the car. According to an employee of a gas station in the town of Silverton, around 9 o'clock in the morning, 2 women filled up the tank and bought coffee. He remembered them because of their friendly laughter. They looked happy, talking about the first snow in the mountains. After that, the trail broke off. That day, the weather was changeable in the San Juan region. The morning sun was replaced by fog, and in the afternoon, it started to snow. The couple's friends recall that on the evening of October 20th, they received a message from Sarah. "Everything is ready. Tomorrow in the mountains." At 8 in the morning on October 21st, she sent an emoji with a mountain peak to her college friend. After that, there was silence. Things were left scattered in their house: an unfinished cup of coffee on the kitchen table, a book Megan had been reading at night on the couch. The atmosphere looked as if they had only been gone for a few days and were due to return. For the city of Durango, this weekend was supposed to be a normal one, but it was the moment the Subaru carrying the 2 women disappeared behind the serpentine San Juan Mountains that the story began that has become one of the state's darkest mysteries. October 22nd, 2016, Saturday. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a patrolman with the La Plata County Sheriff's Department received a report from a tourist who had stopped on the side of an old forest road near Molas Pass. The man noticed an abandoned Subaru Forester with the trunk open. The car was parked on a gravel road, as if the driver had stopped for just a minute. When officers arrived, the scene looked disturbing. The car was locked, but there were personal belongings inside: road maps, spare jackets, and partially packed food. On the front seat was Sarah's camera with a memory card inside, and next to it was a notebook with Megan's notes on the route. The only thing missing was the most important thing: both women's wallets and phones. It seems as if they were taken on purpose. The sheriff's office officially recorded the discovery at 9:40. The license plates confirmed that the car belonged to Megan Blake. According to the database, the car had left Durango the previous morning and was not seen on cameras again. 11 o'clock in the morning, the police contacted Joanne Mitchell, a neighbor, who confirmed that the girls were indeed planning a trip to the mountains. Relatives were warned. Megan's mother from New Mexico arrived the next day. At this point, the case was officially classified as a missing person. The first day of the search began with combing the area around the car. Dogs and drones were used, but only a few steps led from the Subaru on the soggy ground, and then the trail was lost. There were no tracks in the snow, no debris, and no signs of a struggle. The police immediately put forward three main versions. The first was that they were lost. The San Juan Mountains in October are unpredictable. Sharp temperature changes, snow blockages, steep cliffs. It was possible that the couple went on a trail and got into trouble. The second was a voluntary escape. Although their relatives rejected this idea, investigators noted that their wallets and phones were missing and that perhaps the women had left the car and decided to continue on their own. However, the fact of the things left behind did not provide a convincing answer. The third version is a crime. The place where the car was parked is known as a convenient parking lot for tourists, but it also attracts random people. The police did not rule out the possibility that Megan and Sarah could have been attacked. On the same day, October 22 at 17 o'clock, several drivers who had driven on the road the day before were interviewed. One of them, a trucker from New Mexico, claimed to have seen headlights and two figures near the Subaru late in the evening of October 21st. However, he could not describe whether they were women or someone else. On October 23, the search operation expanded. More than 40 volunteers took part, joined by mountain rescuers. The weather deteriorated. Thick fog and wet snow made the work difficult. By the evening, there were no results. Relatives began to publicly put pressure on the authorities. Sarah's mother told reporters, "They couldn't just leave. This is a crime." Colorado newspapers picked up the story, and the couple's disappearance quickly became a regional sensation. Meanwhile, investigators continued to record details. They found a tent and sleeping bags in the trunk. Everything was folded, not used. This meant that Megan and Sarah hadn't even had time to set up camp. On the route map in Megan's notebook, a path was marked that led to the abandoned mines. No one knew if they had made it there. Every minute without new tracks increased the anxiety. The case had all the features of a classic mystery. A missing car with belongings, no bodies, no witnesses, and three versions that left more questions than answers. On October 24, 2016, the search operation moved to another level. After 2 days of fruitless attempts, the La Plata County Sheriff's Department announced the deployment of a headquarters. Large tents were set up in a clearing near an old forest road. A generator and a mobile radio tower were pulled up. More than 60 people were involved in the work: professional rescuers from San Juan, volunteers from Durango and Farmington, and several climbers who knew the local trails well. A helicopter with a thermal imager was taken into the sky, and 2 quadcopters with infrared cameras were used for the first time. 4 dogs specially trained to search for people in the mountains were added to the team. The plan was simple: divide the area into half-mile squares and comb each one, recording the results on a map. The areas with the highest risk were checked first: steep ravines, cliffs, and abandoned mines that gaped like black holes in the forest. On the first day, it became clear how difficult the task was. The San Juan Mountains looked as if they were designed to hide traces. The stone placers did not retain prints, and the streams washed away any odors. The fog descended sharply, and even thermal imagers often showed false flashes from animals or heated stones. On October 25th, a group of rescuers descended into the old Backer mine. Inside, they found fresh traces of a fire and a can of canned food. Experts sent the findings for analysis, but there were no signs that they belonged to Megan or Sarah. The other mines were also empty. The volunteers returned to the headquarters in the evening exhausted, with scratched hands and wet boots. "It's like we're turning the earth upside down, but there's nothing," the captain of the search group wrote in his daily report. Meanwhile, the families of the disappeared have been by their side from the beginning. Alice Blake, Megan's mother, came to the headquarters every day to ask for news. "My daughter couldn't have left on her own. Someone took her," she was quoted as saying in all the local newspapers. Sarah's mother, Julia Lopez, addressed the cameras in despair. "We don't want to wait for the body to be found. We want to find the living." By the end of October, the case had gone beyond the state. National TV channels showed footage of the Subaru on the side of the road, and commentators repeated three versions of the police: lost, runaway, and victims of a crime. But none of the versions were confirmed. The scale of the operation only emphasized the helplessness. More than 60 people, dogs, vehicles, a helicopter, and not a single piece of evidence that the women had ever left their car. San Juan was silent, as if it had swallowed them whole. In Durango, the story became an obsessive whisper. At the market, at school, in coffee shops, the same question was repeated: where are they? The search, which began with hope, has now become a symbol of fear and silence. On April 28, 2017, exactly 6 months after the disappearance of Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez, a San Juan resident, Hunter Robert Kelly, was walking along the raging Animas Creek. In the muddy water among the rocks, he saw a black object with a transparent cover. Prying it out with a stick, he realized it was a damaged GoPro camera. The plastic was scratched and the metal parts were covered with rust, but the memory card was still inside. At first, Kelly thought about keeping the find, but at home he opened the SD card and saw several files. The names included dates: October 21st, 2016, and October 22nd, 2016. These were the days when the women disappeared. On April 30th, the camera was officially handed over to the Sheriff's Department's evidence unit. Experts confirmed that some of the data had been preserved. The first file is a recording in the cabin of a Subaru car. You can see Sarah holding the camera, laughing, and turning it to Megan at the wheel. They are discussing the route map, talking about the first snow in the mountains. The metadata shows the time of creation, October 21st, 10 o'clock in the morning. The atmosphere is light and carefree. The second file is the creepiest. The date, October 22, about 1:30 in the morning. The picture is almost black, only fragments of breathing and the rustling of fabric are heard. Then suddenly, there is a sharp metallic knock, as if someone is hitting an iron door or hatch. Then there are muffled voices, impossible to make out, but the tone is harsh and commanding. At some point, the camera shifts abruptly, the sound cuts off, and the file ends. Experts from the cyber department confirmed that the videos were authentic, with no traces of editing or forgery. The GoPro camera became official material evidence. This discovery turned the case around. Until then, the investigation had been based on three versions: lost, voluntarily fled, and victims of a random crime. Now there was evidence of an outside presence. On May 3rd, at a briefing, Captain Thomas Gray admitted, "We have received evidence that suggests the women may not have been alone. The investigation is moving into the criminal realm." For the families, this was a confirmation of their worst guesses. Sarah's mother repeated through tears to journalists, "I knew it was no accident. Someone was there." Alice Blake insisted on checking the abandoned mines. The knocking in the recording sounds like an underground door. It needs to be checked out. The media spread the news like wildfire. Newspapers wrote, "GoPro speaks for them. Mysterious night knocking." The description of the last recording shocked viewers more than any photos. The camera, washed ashore 6 months later, became a symbol of the case. It captured the moment of transition from an ordinary journey to an unknown tragedy. And the sound of the metal impact that echoed in the darkness of the night now haunted everyone who followed the investigation. In May 2017, a GoPro camera became the main object in the case of Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez. After the first briefing, the recordings were sent for in-depth examination to a laboratory at the University of Colorado. Acoustic experts worked there, able to distinguish random noise from man-made sound. The results were made public on May 17th. The experts unanimously stated that the sharp impacts recorded in the nighttime fragment are most likely metal sounds. Comparison of the spectrograms showed the characteristic echoes that occur when striking an iron door or thick sheets of steel. "These are not stones or random thunderclaps," said acoustics professor David Nolan. "These are rhythmic strikes on a metal surface made deliberately." This conclusion changed the tone of the investigation. All previous versions, lost or victims of a random crime, were put on the back burner. Now the police were working with a hypothesis. The women could have been trapped in a room underground. The Sheriff's Department turned to the archives of the U.S. Geological Survey. There were dozens of abandoned mines in the San Juan Mountains, most of which were closed in the early 20th century after the depletion of silver and copper deposits. The maps were preserved in fragments. Many of them were hand-drawn with unclear notations and dates. From May 22nd to 28th, several rescue teams checked more than 20 mines within a 10-mile radius of where the Subaru was found. The entrances to most were blocked by rocks. Some had simply collapsed during the winter. Several mines showed signs of recent visits, traces of fires, cigarette butts, and the remains of old cans. However, there was no evidence that they were connected to the missing women. In his next report, Captain Thomas Gray wrote, "We are working with the ground that is against us. The old drifts are branched, hundreds of meters of tunnels lead into the darkness. Any of them could be a trap." The women's families have been following every report. Alice Blake told reporters, "My daughter could have heard that same rumble. It was a signal. She wanted us to know they were underground." Julia Lopez spoke even more frankly. "There is someone out there who is hiding people in the mines. I want the police to stop talking about an accident." The media started calling the case "Disappeared Underground." Newspapers published photos of rusty hatches and abandoned entrances to the mines with captions, "Graves that will never open." Television channels showed maps with dozens of markings, explaining to viewers that the San Juan area was a labyrinth where one could enter and never return. On May 29, specialists from the mining inspection confirmed that many mines still had metal doors that once covered the side tunnels. They could have made the sound in the video. One of the engineers commented to local radio, "This place is a museum of iron and stone. You can hear the impact of a hollow iron gate even through hundreds of feet of rock." Despite inspections, no new evidence was found. But the symbolism of the case changed completely. The camera witnessed the last moments, and the sound of metal was a reminder that someone or something was waiting for the women underground. The summer of 2017 was marked by this symbol. In Durango's coffee shops, people were discussing which mine could have been the place of disappearance. Journalists tried to get into the abandoned tunnels, but the police forbade them because of the danger of collapses. Meanwhile, the families had new hope that the camera had kept a key that would help them find the truth. But the searches in the labyrinths of San Juan ended in silence and dust every time. The only thing that remained unchanged was the eerie recording of knocking in the dark, which has now become the voice of the case. 7 years have passed. During this time, the case of Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez officially remained unsolved, but it never faded in the memory of Colorado residents. Every mention of the San Juan mines again raised the eerie image of disappeared underground. The GoPro camera had long been in the police archive, and the recording of the metal clatter was played in lectures on forensics as an example of unproven evidence. In July of 2023, the story suddenly came to life. On July 5th, a construction team from the Rock Mining Service Company was working to strengthen a slope near the Molas Pass. The workers were tasked with checking old tunnels that could pose a danger to the road. One of the excavators accidentally hit a stone embankment with a bucket, and a walled entrance opened up underneath. The opening was narrow, lined with rough bricks, and filled with cement. The construction workers immediately realized that someone had closed the passage on purpose. The team leader called the police. The next day, representatives of the sheriff's department and a team of mining engineers arrived at the site. On July 12th, they officially began to clear the rubble. Behind the brick wall was a short corridor that went underground. Rust-covered ventilation pipes stuck out from the ceiling. Concrete fragments and old boards crunched underfoot. At the end of the corridor, they found a massive metal door. It was ajar, and the lock was broken. Behind the door was a room of about 20 square meters. The walls were concrete, covered with moisture stains. Remnants of electrical wiring hung from the top. The air was stale, with a pungent odor of rust and mold. It was a bunker. On the floor, in the very center, was a rusty safe. The metal was corroded, the lid cracked, as if someone had tried to open it from the inside. Nearby were fragments of wooden shelves and the remains of empty cans. When the safe was carefully opened, a waterproof plastic bag was found inside. It contained a small hardcover notebook, a diary. The paper had yellowed, but the entries were still intact. On the first page, they could clearly read a name: Megan Blake. The safe and diary were immediately sent to experts, but the discovery itself was immediately leaked to the press. On July 13th, the newspapers came out with headlines: 7 years later, a secret bunker found in San Juan. Megan Blake's diary is a new key to the case of the disappeared. The description of the bunker's conditions only added fuel to the fire. Ventilation, metal doors, a walled entrance. It all looked like a planned shelter, not an accidental mine. Social media began to write about the catacombs of death and the man who kept them underground. It was a new shock for the families. Alice Blake said, "My daughter wrote in that diary so that we would know the truth. She left us a trail." Julia Lopez echoed this: "I waited for 7 years, and I knew that their voice would speak again." Officially, the police confirmed that the diary was an authentic artifact found in a bunker less than 2 miles from where the Subaru stood in 2016. An accidental blow from a bucket uncovered what had been hidden underground for years. From that moment on, the case was redefined. It was no longer just a disappearance. It became a story about a hidden room, a brick door, and words written in a diary. The case began to be called Megan and Sarah's Bunker. When the experts opened the notebook found in the bunker's safe, the atmosphere in the lab changed. It was not just an old notebook. It was a voice from the past, written in the hand of one of the missing women. The title page read in black letters, Megan Blake. The notes were written in a blue ballpoint pen. The dates coincided with the days after the official disappearance. The first mark was October 23, 2016. It was the day after the police found the Subaru. In the first lines, Megan wrote about a locked room with no windows and the damp smell of concrete and iron. She noted that she and Sarah were underground and that the door was locked from the outside. The recording sounded like this: "We knock, but no one answers. The ventilation is working. We can hear noise from above. Time is passing slowly." Then the recordings became even more disturbing. October 24th. "We are not alone. We hear footsteps overhead, as if someone is walking on the floor above. Sarah says it's my imagination, but I know the sound. Someone is upstairs. October 25th. The light is fading. The lantern works only from time to time. The food we had is almost gone. Will they hear us? We have been screaming all night. On the page from October 27th. Strange footsteps again. They stopped right above us. Then there was a metallic thud. Sarah was so frightened that she could not speak. I'm recording because I'm afraid this is the last thing that will be left of us. Each subsequent recording became shorter. Cold, hunger, darkness. The last one was dated November 5th, 2016. He broke off on the words, "They came down. We..." Then the pen seemed to slip off the paper and the page was left blank. Experts who studied the diary noticed strange details. In several places on the paper, there were dark spots that turned out not to be mold, but traces of vegetable glue. Chemical analysis showed a mixture of resin and crushed bark from local trees. Such glue is hardly used in modern conditions, but it is known to have been used in ancient traps and rituals. Even more disturbing were the symbols in the margins. Someone, possibly Megan herself or an outsider, had drawn strange signs there. They resembled intertwined circles that looked like solar discs and snake-like figures. Ethnographers invited to analyze the site noted that these symbols resembled the marks of 19th century local cults that combined mining superstitions and Native American rituals. The police report explicitly stated, "Megan's records confirm that she was held underground for at least 2 weeks. The circumstances of the detention are unknown. Symbols and traces of glue may indicate a ritualistic or organized nature of the event." When journalists learned about the contents of the diary, the case was renamed Voices from the Bunker. Newspapers printed excerpts of the text, highlighting the lines, "We are not alone," and "They came down." Television showed diagrams of the mines and painted the image of unknowns who could walk over the women's heads. For the families, this diary was the last touch. Alice Blake said, "I can hear my daughter's voice in these pages. She left a trace so that we could know the truth." The investigation was again at a turning point. The camera with the metallic thud now had confirmation in Megan's words, and the symbols and glue added an eerie mystical symbolism to the case. Everyone realized that this was no longer a story about a disappearance. It was a story about an unknown world underground that left its marks on paper and in memory. In the fall of 2023, the investigation into the case of Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez reached its climax. After analyzing the diary and re-examining the GoPro camera, the La Plata County Sheriff's Department held a final briefing. On October 27th, Captain Thomas Gray spoke to reporters at the Durango courthouse. His words were brief. "We have incontrovertible evidence that Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez were held in an underground room. However, we know neither the persons who did it nor the exact motives. The bodies of the women have not been found." Officially, the case was classified as unresolved. This wording meant that the active investigation was over, but that it could be resumed in the event of new evidence. For the families, this sounded like a verdict. Alice Blake said on camera, "I didn't get an answer, but I got confirmation. My daughter was screaming from underground, and we only heard her after 7 years." Julia Lopez added, "Closing the case does not erase the guilt of those who did this. They are still around." The symbolism of the diary and the safe has gone beyond the official reports. In the local imagination, the bunker became a cursed place. Neighbors told their children, "Don't go into those mines because you can hear footsteps from underground." Newspapers ran stories with the headlines, "The Bunker That Swallowed Love" and "The Ghosts of San Juan." Construction workers who came across the walled entrance refused to return to the site. One of them, after the case was officially closed, told reporters, It was quiet inside, but the silence felt alive, as if the walls were breathing. The safe, the diary, and the camera itself became exhibits in the forensic archive. But for the locals, it was more than evidence. They were material signs that something unknown lives in the mountains. Those who were looking for sensations and those who believed in legends began to make pilgrimages to the closed entrance. Some brought flowers, others left stones with their initials as if to honor invisible victims. The authorities tried to restrict access by walling up the passage again, but they failed to stop the conversations. The case was called Voices from the Bunker or The Cursed Hiding Place, but all versions had the same theme: the footsteps of others heard by the women underground. Months passed, and the question remained: who was walking over Megan and Sarah's heads? Why was the bunker walled up so carefully? And who left the strange symbols in the margins of the diary? The official closure of the case brought only the appearance of closure. In reality, it became part of the collective memory. For Durango and the entire district of La Plata, this story stuck as a warning. Even familiar mountains hide things that are better left untouched. The camera with the knocking, the diary with the torn words, the safe in the bunker, all of this remained unanswered. And the echo of footsteps in the darkness continued to sound in the imagination of those who read Megan's notes. And so the story of Megan Blake and Sarah Lopez came to an official end. But for those who heard this pounding through the pages and videos, there was no full stop. Only 3 dots, an understatement that turned into a shadow that still hangs over the San Juan Mountains.